From Alberta's news source, CBC Alberta News. From Edmonton, Bob Chum. From Calgary, Bob Nicholson.
Tonight, workers are blamed for the Edson train crash.
In Calgary, police patience pays off in a hostage-taking.
And the best place to eat in Banff is a secret.
Good evening. 2 CN workers have been fired after an investigation blamed them for a train crash that killed 3 people. 2 months ago, 19 rail cars rolled free out of the Edson yard and hit an oncoming train. A U.S. company hired by CN to investigate says the workers didn't set and test the brakes properly. Todd Battis reports.
Good morning, everybody. Today, CN laid blame for the crash squarely on the shoulders of the workers in the rail yard that night.
If the cars had had brakes secured by the employees, the accident would not have happened.
And for that, 2 workers were fired. Larry Olson, who heads the railway union, spoke to us from Niagara Falls.
I've just spoken to one of my members that was involved with that, and as of this, I think it was 11 o'clock this morning, they were notified that they were discharged from service, himself and the conductor. I understand the locomotive engineer received 20 demerits for a different rule violation.
In the early hours of August 13th, 10 rail cars rolled out of the Edson yard on their own. They slammed into a westbound freight train, killing 3 men on board. An investigation by a U.S. firm says there are 3 reasons for the crash. The Edmonton control room didn't have proper warning alarms. Secondly, deraillers like this, once in place at Edson, were removed years ago. They could have stopped the cars. But improper braking procedure by the Edson crew was named as the primary cause. Here's how the braking system works. A yard crew member would have physically cranked this wheel. Now that tightens the brake to the rail car wheel and keeps the car from moving. The investigation found out that if that wheel had been cranked another inch, that would have applied enough pressure to keep all the cars from moving.
There were several...
The report recommends several safety improvements. CN says it has met all of them, including installing 250 deraillers across Canada, including Edson.
This accident delivered us a message that we have improvements we can and should make, and we're going to.
The 2 men fired by CN say they'll fight their dismissal. As for the accident itself, this will not be the final word. 2 more investigations, one by CN and one by Transport Canada, have yet to report. Until then, the 2 men at the Edson yard will have to bear the official burden for the death of the 3 men. Todd Battis, CBC News, Edmonton.
Police credit a new kind of ammunition and a lot of patience with successfully ending a hostage-taking at the Calgary bus station last night. For 4 hours, tense hours indeed, a man held a knife to the throat of an elderly woman. Graham Richardson reports.
No, so this, you know, we go this way.
Just after 6 o'clock last night, the Greyhound bus terminal in Calgary was in chaos.
So if we can do that straight away, that's for your own safety. But just hang on and we'll get you all on there.
It's a volatile situation and we don't know where it's headed right now.
Police say this man, Kyle McMenamin, came to Calgary on a bus from BC. Just as it was pulling into the station, he jumped out of an emergency window. Witnesses say he pulled out a knife and grabbed a 76-year-old woman, a complete stranger. He held Janet Benning hostage for more than 4 hours. The police TAC team surrounded the building. These people were on the same bus as Benning and the hostage taker.
He grabbed her, and I stand in front of her, and after he told everybody, if we're moving, he's going to push the knife in her throat. Yeah.
What did you think?
Oh, really? Oh, I am really scared.
Police sealed off the building and moved hundreds of passengers outside as they negotiated with the hostage taker. Greyhound officials brought in extra buses, trying to keep things on schedule. It was not easy.
8 o'clock, Edmonton.
So we're going to have to double
There's some inbounds coming in.
I was just getting up to the counter when they pushed us back.
I think somebody said there was another passenger for you here.
Okay. This is ridiculous. I want a limo.
Finally, just after 10 o'clock, McMenamin let the hostage go. But as police moved in to arrest him, they say he lunged at them with his knife. They shot him with 2 bullets designed to hurt but not kill a suspect. He was taken to hospital with minor injuries. Today, police refused to be specific about the new ammunition, but they say it allowed them to end the hostage-taking as peacefully as possible.
In the old days, a lot of these options technologically weren't available to police forces. So you didn't have much of a range between the minimum level of force you could use and the maximum level of force that you could deploy to resolve a situation.
McMenamin is facing confinement, assault, and weapons charges. Police have recommended a psychiatric assessment. Graham Richardson, CBC News, Calgary.
A 22-hour armed standoff that began yesterday in Edmonton ended tragically this morning. It began when a man with a rifle barricaded himself in a South Side home. A police tactical squad was called out and for almost 24 hours tried to persuade the man to come out. Late this morning, a single shot was heard. The police say the man killed himself.
Well, there's been a big response to a story we told you last night about victims of a recent house explosion and fire in Calgary. Debbie Vogel and her 2-year-old son lost everything when their townhouse exploded last week. Debbie and her grandparents were mystified that no one donated to a trust fund set up to help them, even though thousands of dollars were being donated for a dog that was mauled by a pit bull in the city on the same week. Well, today, people from all over Alberta and as far away as Halifax are offering cash, clothing, and furniture. All branches of the Bank of Nova Scotia, by the way, are accepting donations.
You're watching CBC Alberta News. Still ahead with weather, meteorologist Steve Rockfelds. With sports, Mark Connolly. And on Rough Cuts, Colin McLean.
An Alberta man's battle for gay rights will go to the Supreme Court of Canada. Delwyn Vreend was fired from his teaching job 6 years ago because he's gay. He tried to have Alberta protect gays through legislation. But so far, the government has refused what Vreend calls his basic human rights. Rick Boguski reports.
Alberta is one of 2 provinces in Canada that doesn't give gays and lesbians legal protection to guard against discrimination. Delwyn Vreend is hoping the Supreme Court will change that.
I mean, I think it's an important public and legal issue, let alone a private issue. And now the Supreme Court, of course, has agreed with that.
Vreend was fired from his teaching job at this Christian college in 1991 when the college found out he was gay.
Human Rights Commission, Judy speaking.
When Vreend turned to Alberta's Human Rights Commission, the commission said it couldn't investigate his complaint because Alberta's Human Rights Act doesn't protect people on the basis of their sexual orientation.
I think the human rights position is that it is discrimination. They've recommended it be put in.
So did the Court of Queen's Bench when in 1994 it ordered the Alberta government to include sexual orientation in its legislation. But the government appealed and won.
Also, if I recall correctly, some years ago, this came to the legislature, and it was rejected in the legislature. Now, the legislature, in my opinion, is paramount in this.
But this law professor believes the Constitution is what's paramount, and that's where she thinks the Alberta government may be fighting a losing battle.
There are disabling provisions in the Charter that say to the government, there are certain things you can't do. And so my view would be that they are vulnerable, that the government's position is vulnerable in this case.
Well, Canada's Charter of Rights clearly states that governments cannot create laws that discriminate against homosexuals. What the Supreme Court must decide is whether Alberta's inaction in this area, its failure to produce a law, counts as discrimination.
The people representing Delwyn Vreend believe it does.
We have a provincial government that is spending our tax dollars to fight a case that is so incredibly wrong for them to be challenging this.
But the minister believes the government can't be blamed.
It is not us that is taking this further. It is an individual.
An individual who says, again just this week, he and his partner were refused an apartment because of their sexual orientation. Yet another case, he says, that proves a need for legislation protecting homosexuals from discrimination. Rick Boguski, CBC News, Edmonton.
It wasn't an accident. It was neglect. That's what the family of Corporal Neil McKinnon is saying about his death. McKinnon was killed during a training exercise at CFB Suffield last year. His father and sister have come to Calgary from Nova Scotia to look at confidential military documents. Natalie Clancy reports.
Bernie and Tracy McKinnon came to Calgary on Monday. All week, they've been given access to military documents about how Corporal Neil McKinnon died. He was killed during a training exercise just like this one at CFB Suffield.
It wasn't an accident, it was neglect.
McKinnon says he was shocked to read in the documents that safety rules weren't followed. He won't go into detail because he doesn't want to jeopardize the case against 3 soldiers who've been charged.
When I came out here, I had certainly no vengeance against anybody. But after I read the report, I am bitter against some people.
McKinnon is also angry with the way the military handled the death of his son. At first, he was told a grenade exploded in Neil's hand. But he says the documents show it was clear from the start Neil was actually shot in the head first. McKinnon wasn't told for months.
Here we went for months and months that we thought Neil blowed himself with a grenade. And Neil was too good of a boy to do this.
McKinnon says the image of his son's death still haunts him.
You go to bed in the night time, and now you can see, I could see him come with a grenade. I don't know. I just can't. And now they admit they're wrong. But they could have cleared a lot of rights by telling the truth right from the start.
This afternoon, the McKinnons traveled to CFB Suffield to see for themselves where Neil died. His fellow soldiers held a private memorial service for him. But Bernie McKinnon says this trip has not put all of his questions to rest. He's still waiting to see what will happen at a court-martial expected to take place here next month. Natalie Clancy, CBC News, Calgary.
Which Ralph Klein do you prefer? A woman's magazine says a facelift would do him a world of good. Should Calgary get tax dollars to bring Expo 2005 to Cowtown? And how come the Premier is being challenged for his Calgary seat? We'll find out on To The Point later on the CBC Alberta News.
Some real heavyweights are in Calgary, real heavyweights, to raise money for the Children's Hospital. Professional wrestlers they are. They held a news conference today to promote a charity match this weekend. World Wrestling Federation stars will be the main attraction at the event, which is called Big Bang Boom. Organizers are hoping to raise $20,000 for the Alberta Children's Hospital. It's a tribute to Matthew Annis, a teenage member of Calgary's well-known Hart family who died in July from toxic shock syndrome. His uncle, Owen Hart, is among the wrestlers taking to the ring this coming Saturday.
I visited Matthew every day in the hospital, and along the way I saw a lot of sick children. And with these cutbacks in this day and age, it's important that we don't neglect our hospital system. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to be in a spotlight a little bit, to have people admire us and look forward to seeing us. And if I can donate my services and raise it for a special cause like this, I couldn't think of a better way.
A WWF charity autograph session will be held at the Saddle Dome just before the match.
Well, the town of Banff has its share of attractions, let's face it. The mountains, lots of shopping, and some of the best dining in Alberta. But one of those fine places to eat is a bit of a secret, at least to outsiders. Silvana Sakamani explains.
It's just after noon in Banff. Time for Colette Gauthier and Dallas Carmody to go have lunch. Banff is known for its fine dining, and with restaurants on every street, the choices are endless. But Dallas and Colette walk by all of them. They're going to have lunch at a hospital, the Banff Mineral Springs Hospital. Colette and Dallas aren't alone. A lot of people from the community are regulars here.
Thank you. The food's delicious and there's lots of healthy options.
This is much better than most restaurants.
When hospitals are notorious for serving up bad food, how does the Banff Mineral Springs Hospital buck the trend and make meals that people actually enjoy eating?
The first thing people say when they heard that I work in a hospital coming from a fine dining restaurant is, how can you work in a hospital? I mean, hospital food is never great. And I told them that you take the hospital out of the food and you end up having a good product.
Expert chefs like Rose say they like working at the hospital. They say the hours and benefits are better than they would be at a restaurant in town.
Delicious.
The food that draws customers to the cafeteria for lunch,
a great deal. You couldn't get this deal at Giorgio's,
is quite often the same food the patients eat.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
And sometimes it's served on fine china by a chef.
There you go, sir.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
If they keep feeding me like this, I'd stay here another day.
The combination of good food and reasonable prices has been around for over a year, and the diners' response has helped the hospital's bottom line. The money it makes from the kitchen helps buy medical equipment. That knowledge leaves customers like Colette and Dallas even more satisfied. Silvana Sakamani, CBC News, Banff.
Looks pretty nice. Well, when Steve Rothfels went outside, it was pretty nice in Calgary, too, but I saw some black clouds up there, Steve.
Bob, all a figment of your imagination. Nothing like that. First Chinook of the season so far for much of central and southern Alberta,
And would you believe it got up to the mid-20s today in the southern part of the province, as warm there as it was in the southern part of Texas. Right now in Calgary, with just some variable cloud, the temperature is 19 degrees. Edmonton has some high cloud and 12 degrees, so would one more day of this be too much to ask? I'll tell you in about 10 minutes.
All right, thanks, Steve. When we come back on the CBC Alberta News tonight, anger in the Middle East. Muslim extremists warn people to get ready for war.
And a strike by 15,000 General Motors workers could be felt right across this country. Stay with us.
You're with CBC Alberta News.
In world news tonight from the Middle East, residents of Gaza and the West Bank are angry about the outcome of that emergency summit in Washington this week. Israel refused to budge in its showdown with the Palestinians. Now Muslim extremists are warning people to get ready for war. Anna Maria Tremonti reports.
They lifted the curfew in Hebron for a few hours at dawn. By 9 a.m., Israeli soldiers were bullying the vendors, shutting down the shops, and arresting the few Palestinians still on the street. Elsewhere in the West Bank, the restrictions on Palestinian movement created this scene. Arab-made textiles are transferred over a barricade to an Israeli truck, the only way they'll get to their Israeli buyers.
We lose safety, we lose money, we lose more expensive than the time.
There is frustration and anger among Palestinians. This was the scene at a wake for a 12-year-old boy killed by Israeli soldiers. The Washington summit that was to have helped a hobbled peace process seems a failure to many. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas is already warning of its own brutal brand of trouble.
And we are ready to use any means to get rid of the occupation.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived home today to a throng of supporters pleased he offered nothing more than to keep talking. But on the route home, some Israelis thought differently. And in a tiny Jewish settlement in the Gaza Strip, settlers were sandbagging their properties, expecting more trouble. Senior Israeli and Palestinian security officials are now working together to try to ensure calm. Optimists might say that's a good sign, but the pessimists here would say things are so volatile, there's really no other choice. Anna Maria Tremonti, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Britain today, there was a sad ending to the story of a woman who became pregnant after taking fertility drugs. Mandy Allwood was trying to carry 8 babies to term, even though her doctors told her they wouldn't survive. She began miscarrying on Monday, and by last night, she had lost all the babies. Doctors had suggested Allwood abort 6 of the fetuses so that 2 could survive. But she ignored that advice after a British tabloid offered her a 6-figure sum if she gave birth to all 8. She's now in stable condition.
A volcanic eruption on a large glacier is prompting fears of flooding in Iceland today. The eruption of the Loki volcano has melted the 600 meters thick ice on top of it. Rivers near the glacier are now overflowing. The eruption probably began Tuesday but didn't break through the ice until yesterday morning. When it did, the volcano spewed a 3,000 meters high geyser of steam and gas, showering ash over a 100-kilometer area. Loki last erupted in 1938.
Picket lines are up and assembly lines are down at General Motors plants in Oshawa, Ontario and Sainte-Thérèse, Quebec. 15,000 workers walked out last night and thousands more are preparing to join them. As Havard Gould reports, the effect of this strike could be felt right across Canada.
It's a high-stakes struggle, a battle each side says it must win.
We don't do this sometime or other, we're not going to have jobs to be out here doing this.
The key issue is outsourcing. General Motors is trying to catch up with its competitors, who have cut costs. GM wants to follow the industry trend and buy less expensive parts from outside suppliers and make fewer of the basic components.
We really need, on a fairly aggressive basis, to move out of that. It's not competitive, it's not profitable. You know, our customers will not pay for that inefficiency.
The union says it can't allow GM to buy more of its parts elsewhere because that would cost thousands of union members their jobs. GM has already announced plans to close or sell several plants.
When they outsource, the auto suppliers, what they pay those workers is substantially lower than what our workers make here in GM. It's not right.
Where's it going to stop? So the whole place is outsourced, and just an assembly plant then, and just bring parts in, put them together, need robots to do that?
The union says it has a strike fund that will last about 8 weeks, and it can borrow or raise more money if necessary. General Motors won't say how many vehicles it has in its inventory, but it can't have enough full-size pickup trucks. The Oshawa plant had been working around the clock to keep up with demand. The strike will also affect several GM plants in the United States that count on Canadian parts. Canadian parts manufacturers will soon be hurt too. Analysts expect hundreds of companies will have to lay off workers, and the overall damage to the Canadian economy could be significant.
A strike at GM in October will slow the economy down at the beginning of the fourth quarter. If it doesn't end quickly, that could impact the overall fourth quarter growth rate for the economy.
Both sides say they're still available to talk, but with such a huge difference between them, neither seems to expect that negotiations now could accomplish much. Howard Gould, CBC News, Oshawa, Ontario.
Steve Rothfeld joins us now. That was a black cloud out there.
Bob, it must have disappeared really quick, because I couldn't find it, even with a nephoscope, which I'll tell you about later.
A nephoscope already.
Let's take a look at the weather. In Edmonton now, at high cloud, the temperature is 12 degrees, which is the high so far. 1 degree was the overnight low. In Calgary, with variable cloud, the temperature is 19 degrees. Relative humidity, comfy 34%. It rocketed to 21 after a mild night with a low of 4 degrees. Temperatures today range from the low teens in the northern part of the province all the way into the mid. Look at this, 24 in Lethbridge today, and that's not all. Other parts of southern Alberta, 24 as well as Lethbridge down in Milk River. And the hot spots in the province as well as the country today. You folks in Claresholm and the 1 or 2 residents in 1-4 also enjoying 25 degrees. Let's take a look now at our upper-level wind chart, and it shows the path of the jet streams as they arc across southern Alberta. Remember, the jet streams act as a dividing area between much warmer on the southern areas, which is actually poked up into southern Alberta, and cooler air on the north side. And with the jet stream maintaining this mild flow from off the coast of BC and Washington into the southern half of the province, it should continue mild for another day or so. Satellite picture from the past 24 hours shows variable amounts of cloud, and then at the end here you can see this sort of ominous-looking cloud. This is high-based moisture, and it won't result in too much. From straight out in space, the same thing, variable amounts of cloud and a thicker band of cloud coming across the mountains. Most of the moisture will be lost in the mountains and on the west side of them. Surface map, which takes us from this afternoon to tomorrow afternoon, will maintain the mild air on the south side of this front through most of the province. A little cooler in the north tomorrow. Could even be some showers in the north and the northern Rockies areas. But elsewhere, just variable amounts of cloud with temperatures from the teens into the 20s again in the south. For southern Manitoba, not a bad day. Mid-teens, sunny skies. Look for temperatures in the low to mid-teens over southwestern Ontario with lots of sunshine. Eastern Ontario, southern Quebec, and the Maritimes will all see mainly sunny skies, but cool with highs only in the high single numbers. And for Newfoundland, look for a rainy day tomorrow, but temperatures in the mid-teens. Let's return to Alberta, and we'll start off, as we usually do, in the northwest. Look for some morning cloud, otherwise sunny skies, a high of 11 or 12. For Fort McMurray, morning showers, clearing in the afternoon, a high of 13. For Lac La Biche, cloudy with a few sunny breaks, a high of 14. For central regions, variable cloud, but continuing mild, a high of 19 to 22. For Jasper, cloudy with showers and 14. For Banff, partly cloudy and 15. And in the south, mainly sunny with a moderate west wind and mild highs from 18 to 23. In Edmonton, I'm forecasting some clouds. Temperatures will remain above freezing with a low of 3 in and around the capital city. Tomorrow, mainly cloudy but milder with a high of 17. Nice day to finish your roof shingling. And then chance of a shower Saturday with a gusty northwest wind developing and cooler. Then more sun for Sunday and Monday, but it will remain on the cool side with highs only in the low teens. Good leaf-raking weather on Sunday, though. In Calgary, I'm predicting a few clouds, a low of 7 in the city, and 5 degrees out in Airdrie, Okotoks, and Strathmore as you rouse your slumbering spouse to make breakfast. Tomorrow, some sun, some cloud, continuing mild with a high near 22. Yes, definitely a day to ride the bike to work. And then some cloud, windy, and cooler on Saturday. Then the sun returns for Sunday and Monday, but we'll be back to frosty nights again, folks. still, the good weather, it's going to be good to clean the car after the snow. And this evening, our artist is Johnny Plivalik, I hope that's right, Johnny, of Edmonton, with a sunny sky over an apartment building whose balconies could use some renovation. And Lance Soloway, who's in grade 2 in Edmonton, on the top of a mountain peak. Don't eat yellow snow, Lance. Send any pictures of the weather to us here at the Weather Watcher, Box 2640 or Box 555 in Edmonton. I was at Woodland School today. The grade 5s introduced me to it was called a nephoscope. I've never heard of that before, and they told me what it does. It's a weather instrument.
Well, what's it do?
It measures the direction of movement of clouds.
Because the folks from 1-4 were kind of curious, so was I.
Right.
Yeah, here's a couple of guys from 1-4 right now.
1-4, I missed that.
I missed that. Well, a nephoscope will get you one. You'll be able to figure it out.
All right.
Hockey fever
begins tonight. We've got the previews. You want to know what's going to happen with the Flames and the Oilers? Well,
Sure,
we'll tell you.
tell me.
NHL season gets underway tomorrow night. The Edmonton Oilers begin their season at home to the Buffalo Sabres, while the Calgary Flames are on the road Saturday in Vancouver. Big expectations for both teams coming into the season, and we have a look at what to expect. We start with Doug Dirks in Calgary.
I really think that people are underrating us, but that's fine.
Actually, it's a wonder anyone's trying to rate Dave Gagne and the Flames at all. Calgary won 6 of 8 in the preseason, but they're still one of the biggest question marks in the NHL.
Once we start on Saturday and Sunday, how are the players that have been so good for us in training camp are going to react to the games when we're playing for 2 points?
That's a good question, Al, because the Flames will start the season with 9 new faces on their 24-man roster. Gary Roberts and Michael Nylander will be missed up front, but the Flames are expecting big things from rookies like Jerome Iginla and Jonas Höglund. Robert Reichel is back from Europe to center Theoren Fleury and Germán Titov. And with Gagne anchoring the second line, the Flames think they'll have enough offense to win consistently.
We've got everybody capable of scoring. We got some good offensive defensemen, Zarley Zalewski, James Patrick, and moves the puck well, Steve Chason when he comes back.
Chason's knee injury will keep him out of the lineup for another couple of weeks, forcing the Flames to open the season with young defensemen like Cale Hulse, Todd Simpson, and Chris O'Sullivan.
On paper, they might look inexperienced, but I think they're ready to play, and I think they'll play well.
If the kids struggle, Calgary's new 3-goalie rotation will be showcased early, giving the Flames the option of trading either Trevor Kidd or Rick Tabaracci. Doug Dirks, CBC Sports, Calgary.
I'm Jamie Campbell in Edmonton. This summer, Glenn Sather made 2 promises. 1, he'd sign Doug Weight and Jason Arnott. 2, the Oilers would make the playoffs. The first has been kept, which makes the second possible. But it'll take more than just Arnott and Weight. Dean McCammond has a new contract, and as always, it brings expectations he looks ready to live up to. Zdeno Seeger is gone, but Andrei Kovalenko, with 28 goals last year, is a worthy replacement.
That's one part that's going to likely help us. I think we still need somebody else, likely one more player. And I think if we get that player, we could be a pretty good hockey club.
On defense, the Oilers have regained something they haven't had in years: depth. One of the newer faces on this club is actually an old face. Kevin Lowe didn't come here to win a Stanley Cup, but he did come here to teach the young guys what it takes to win.
The key is to try to keep an even keel and, have confidence in your ability and, have confidence that this group of guys is good enough not only to make the playoffs, but to win the Stanley Cup. But unless you truly believe that, unless you, go into every game thinking that way, you're never going to do it.
Lowe joins a mixed bunch, including freewheeling Boris Mironov and Brian Marchment, who can be a detriment to a forward's health. Add one of the league's best goaltenders in Curtis Joseph, and this team has a lot of promise. Good thing, too, if Glenn Sather's promise is to be kept. Jamie Campbell, CBC Sports, Edmonton.
The Oilers announced the signing of 3 more players today, including Miroslav Shatan, who will be the left winger on their first line with Doug Weight. Major League umpires will strike Friday in protest of Roberto Alomar's continued presence in the playoffs with Baltimore. Owners are seeking an injunction to prevent it. Today, well, it was Brett Hall of the Blues watching San Diego Padres as they visited the St. Louis Cardinals. Hometown Cards led 4-3 in the 8th, but Steve Finley grounds out to first. The sacrifice scored Livingston to tie the game 4-4. Bottom of the ninth, 2 men on. The Padres bring their stopper Trevor Hoffman, but he can't make the catch on Tom Pagnosi's comebacker. Jody Reed's only play is to first. The Cards sacrifice scores Brian Jordan from third, and the Cards win it 5-4. Meanwhile, Atlanta and Los Angeles are just underway. The Braves lead the series 1 game tonight, and they're tied 1-1 in the early innings. Well, the highlights of that as well as the rest of the sports tonight at 11.
And still to come on this edition of the CBC Alberta News, big news for heart attack victims. A new therapy will help them live longer. And later, rough cuts on the arts return.
Tonight on Rough Cuts in the Arts, a Calgary company sets the stage for a new musical production of Ragtime. I'm Lisa Buck. That story later in the CBC Alberta News.
You're watching CBC Alberta News. From Calgary, Bob Nicholson. From Edmonton, Bob Chelman.
In this half hour, heart attack victims can live much longer.
To the point on politics and facial features?
And Albertans take it to the Great White Way.
In medical news tonight, most heart attack victims can dramatically reduce their chances of dying from further heart problems. That's the good news today from a study that recommends an anti-cholesterol drug. Jed Gahane reports.
66-year-old Gaston Lapointe had a major heart attack in 1990. Statistics show he had a 1 in 3 chance of having another heart attack within 5 years. But he didn't, and he thinks his medication had something to do with it. It's as if I'd never had a heart attack, he says. I feel good as new. For the past 5 years, Lapointe and more than 4,000 other heart attack survivors have been taking a drug called pravastatin. Pravastatin helps stop the production of cholesterol, but in the past, doctors only prescribed it to people with high levels of cholesterol. This study focused on patients with normal levels, and the results are encouraging.
We can make a major impact on the well-being of those patients long-term, reducing the major coronary event rate by 1/4, and in women, perhaps as much as half. So there's no doubt that we now have to treat those patients by reducing their cholesterol significantly.
Doctors say these new findings are important because 2/3 of heart attack survivors have normal cholesterol levels. The best solution, of course, is for them to change their diet and eat less meat. But doctors know many patients won't do that.
To lower cholesterol by diet requires an incredibly stringent regime. And unless one really has a taste for sawdust and grass and tree bark, it's hard to maintain that year after year, decade after decade.
The authors of the study say some patients should probably stay on pravastatin for the rest of their lives. At a cost of about $1,000 a year, that may seem like an expensive proposition. But doctors say the alternative is more heart attacks and more bypasses, and that could end up costing the health system a lot more. Jed Gahane, CBC News, Montreal.
There was a call today for a total ban on the sale and production of landmines by the year 2000. An international conference was told there are about 110 million mines now buried in 70 countries. Ron Charles has our story.
But this lake cost $8,000.
Ken Rutherford is a landmine survivor. He lost a leg while working for a development organization in Angola 2 years ago. But being an American, he counts himself lucky.
This problem inhabits Cambodia, Mozambique, Angola, places where people don't have their funds, where loss of a limb means really end of a life.
Rutherford is in Ottawa for an international conference on the elimination of landmines. Delegates from 70 countries and organizations heard troubling statistics.
The international community, in some ways, is losing the struggle. While we may clear as many as 100,000 landmines per year, another 2 to 5 million new landmines will be deployed. While we spend millions a year on landmine victims, there are some 70 new victims every day.
The Canadian government announced plans to put an additional $2 million into international mine clearing efforts. Canada will also reduce this country's stockpile of landmines by 2/3. These drawings by children in Afghanistan were among many at the conference, reminding delegates of how cruel the legacy of landmines can be. Ron Charles, CBC News, Ottawa.
In South Africa tonight, a huge fire is raging through one of the country's biggest tourist attractions, Kruger National Park. Fire has already destroyed 1/3 of the park, one of the most diverse wildlife areas in the world. Thousands of animals and birds have died. Thousands more are running for safety. A lightning storm started the fire last week. The despite the losses, park officials say the fire is part of nature's ecological cycle.
When we come back on the CBC Alberta News, our political panel will get right to the point on matters financial, not to mention cosmetic.
You're with CBC Alberta News.
So how deep are Ralph Klein's pockets? Will he slip Expo promoters in Calgary some big bucks? And a woman's magazine says the years have not been so kind to Ralph. They're, in fact, suggesting a facelift. Our panel of political pundits tackle those weighty issues and more tonight on To the Point.
Weighty issues indeed. And our panel this week consists of Paul McLaughlin. He joins us from the Alberta Legislature. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Bob.
Paul McLaughlin publishes the Alberta Political Scan. Catherine Ford in Calgary is the national columnist for Southern newspapers. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Bob.
And Don Martin is in Edmonton, and he covers things political in Alberta for the Calgary Herald. Hi, Don.
Hi, Bob.
Well, Paul, why don't you start this week and talk about the dollars for the Expo bid 2005. They asked the City of Calgary for, what, 70 million? They got 38, and they've asked the province, and they got a, well, maybe.
Well, the province essentially said that they would look at it when they got a little bit more information. I can't believe that the provincial government is even looking at this, given what's happened over the last 3 years. I mean, the arguments that they make, first of all, is that they're asking for lottery dollars, as if lottery dollars aren't real dollars. And then they essentially, I mean, the big argument is an economic development argument that says the spin-off in the community will be huge. Well, if the spin-off in the community is so huge, let the market bear the risk rather than taxpayers. I mean, I think ordinary Albertans have other things that they would rather the money put on. I mean, the school that my kids go to, the gym's not big enough to hold everybody in the school. Why don't they fix the school?
Okay, I guess you better have somebody from Calgary have a shot at this. What do you think?
Absolutely. You are a Grinch, Paul. Good heavens. And lottery, you know, the sad fact is that lottery money is not real money. It's not general revenues. I don't want a tax on the, you should forgive me, a tax on the stupid to be used to pay for hospitals or school gymnasiums or the things that we need. It should go toward the extras.
Oh, well, let's get real here. I mean, they're talking, what, $300–400 million towards extras? I mean, what is it? You know, a huge amount of it already goes into general revenues to help balance the budget.
Yeah, the optics, Catherine, are awful. We've got hospitals closing and parks being privatized to save relatively few dollars. What the government's going to do is try and find ways to get this money to them without it being cash. So you'll see underpasses and convention centers or whatever it takes in terms of capital improvements to get that expo off the ground. But they do not want to be seen walking over and handing a 9-digit check to the expo organizers. It's appalling.
Well, that's, I mean, you're right on that. But my objection is, of course, the question that lottery money should be used for real things that we really need.
Paul McLaughlin, do you think corporate money should be raised for this?
Oh, well, I think there will be corporate money raised. I mean, I think the problem is that you get in a little bit and then you gradually get in more and more. And 9 years from now, are we going to be picking up a part of a deficit if it runs a deficit? And that's a risk that the government has said consistently they won't
Never have a deficit in Calgary. Never.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, well, let's talk about something else now, if we can, and that's a bit of a party plan for, what, next Wednesday night in Calgary Elbow. Don Martin, it's a nomination meeting for Ralph Klein, but there's some competition.
Oh, but it's still a slaughter, Bob. They've got telemarketing specialists in there to do phone blitzes of the Calgary Elbow constituency with an eye to having well in excess of 1,000 people out to support Ralph Klein. And Harold Swanson is a retired radiologist that's trying to put up a fight to make a point that, you know, he opposes the Calgary General being shut down. But, you know, and this is going to be an indication of how much opposition there is to Ralph Klein's health care policies. But really, I don't think anyone in their right mind expects Ralph Klein to do anything but squash that, you know, doctor like a mosquito.
At least he's got people talking. At least there is some opposition. But I agree with you completely, Don, because the only riding that did not vote overwhelmingly for Ralph Klein was me and my neighbors, and we got gerrymandered into Calgary Curry because of it.
Paul McLaughlin.
Well, I think it's more a little bit of media hype than anything else. I think Don's right. The Tories will just will just crush him. They don't want any embarrassment to Ralph Klein. They don't even want it to be close at this point.
Well, isn't there some potential for embarrassment here, having a physician bringing up those ugly healthcare issues?
Well, I mean,
Paul?
symbolically, it looks really, it's really good in terms of the people who are concerned about cuts to the healthcare system. But I mean, in the way that it'll shake out, I don't think that the conservative organizers would let it happen for a second.
Bob, this is going to be sort of a reverse protest because it's going to be so overwhelming that you'll probably see Ralph Klein look at this as sort of an official pep rally, a kickstart for his campaign, rather than any organized opposition to his health care policies.
Now, Catherine, you figure he's going to win hands down even without having a facelift?
Oh, dear. Oh, my.
Well, magazine.
Let's face this. I'm sorry, I can't help.
Here's the Elm Street magazine. We're seeing pictures of Ralph Klein before and after. On the left is what a photo artist's representation is of what they would like Ralph Klein to look like. Of course, Ralph Klein.
Face it. Yes. Yes.
He said, my wife likes me just as I am, thank you.
Well,
and so do the voters, so what difference does it make?
as the only person in this crowd who was close to being Ralph's age, and someone who gravity is inexorably grabbing onto too, we probably both could use facelifts. But what so appalls me is that here's a woman's magazine, and I would think that in the late 90s, where women are saying, look at us for our inner beauty, a woman's magazine is getting into the plastic surgery suggestions. This is just, I mean, it's frightening to think of Ralph with a permanent grin on his face.
This shallow and frivolous issue, did it really go around the legislature, Paul?
Oh, not. It was good for about 30 seconds of laughter at a press conference. That was about it. I mean, it's essentially the trivialization of politics. Who cares how our politicians look?
Sure, and I think it's fair to say that voters like the fact Ralph Klein looks more like them than a slick, colorless politician. They kind of like those jowls.
Slick columnist.
Thanks.
But he did say he was going to work on the jowls. All right, what's the latest update? Who's not running this week in the election, Paul?
Well, Brian Evans announced early in the week that he wouldn't be running. There's rumors that Stan Schumacher, the Speaker of the Legislature, will be announcing his intentions on Saturday. I don't know if there's another big name left to go or not. There are some ministers who haven't filed their nomination papers yet. Steve West, even though he says he's running. Ken Kowalski, even though he says he's running. Butch Fisher, who hasn't decided. And Diane Myrosh, who hasn't decided. So those four, we sought to hear from them.
Thanks all for getting to the point this week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
When we come back, all the world's a stage, and a Calgary company is building it. Rough Cuts on the Arts returns with that story and a look at some local theater productions around Alberta.
You're with CBC Alberta News.
Well, Alberta's lively art scene is in the spotlight tonight and will be most every Thursday as Rough Cuts on the Arts returns to the CBC Alberta News.
That's right. Every week, Lisa Buck will highlight the best in local theater. She'll visit art gallery shows, and she'll talk with fascinating authors and artists of all types.
What a job. This week, Lisa tells us about a Calgary company with a major role in a big-time musical.
I'm Lisa Buck, and welcome to Rough Cuts on the Arts, our weekly look at the art scene in Alberta. Well, tonight we're going to take a look at some of the angels and ghosts that are flitting around the theaters in our province. But first, a Calgary company who's setting the stage for a big-time ragtime musical. The time is 1906. The place is New York, and the story is ragtime. Now, you might think that this is all a long way from present-day Alberta. But it's not. The story of ragtime is about to become a musical extravaganza. And while the setting is still New York, the set is being built here in Calgary.
We do steel and aluminum fabrication. We do painting, drop painting, and set painting. We're building a lot of antique replica furniture pieces. And in the construction department, again, we do everything. It's exciting. You're never really doing the same job twice.
At F&D Scene Changes, project manager Darren Wilkie juggles the hundreds of details that arise when drafting board meets workshop.
It's just rattling around inside this old brain of mine.
We're technical wizards more than anything else.
Darren has a crew of 100 wizards working 11 hours a day, making little things big and big things little.
Where else can you have this much fun? This is like being a child. Oh, it is, kind of.
Eugene Lee is the set designer for Ragtime.
This is a new musical. It's not figured out. It's changing all the time. I'm particularly known sometimes for my very heavy scenery. You know, if you can't lift it with a crane, I'm not too interested in it.
Eugene flies in from New York to work with F&D.
I don't think I could get a shop in New York to do it this good. I don't think, not a chance.
F&D has earned its reputation for work on other shows like Miss Saigon and Les Miserables. But Ragtime is their biggest project yet. Just how big?
It's not that big.
This is a very large show.
Honestly speaking, it's a really modest show.
I would hazard a guess that it's one of the largest ever produced.
But designer and workmen agree on one thing. While the workmanship must be outstanding, the work shouldn't stand out.
If you go to the theater to see the scenery, then I would say the play is a failure. I'm sure it is. I don't know.
But when Ragtime opens in Toronto on December 9th, you know there'll be at least 2 people interested in the scenery.
Anytime I see anything I've worked on, it's still mine.
Well, I just hope it works, you know. One just always hopes it works.
If you're looking to take in a little theater this coming week, here's our arts reel to give you a sneak preview of what's around.
You're a good dancer, Hagar.
Oh, I'm the one, all right.
Margaret Lawrence's The Stone Angel comes to the stage at Edmonton's Roxy Theatre.
Feeling pleased with what I knew and who I was, where I lived.
Set in the fictional town of Maniwaki, Manitoba, The Stone Angel brings to life the memories of spirited and ornery Hagar Shipley. The production runs until October 13th.
I think Oswald's thinking of the time when you were so against him being an artist.
You've only got till this weekend to catch Henrik Ibsen's Ghost, the season opener for Edmonton's Citadel Theatre.
And then he can get back his strength and prepare himself for some big new project.
A widow and her family are haunted by dark secrets and moral blindness in this newly adapted version of an old classic. From Ghost back to Angels, part 1 of Tony Kushner's Pulitzer Prize-winning play Angels in America is now playing at Calgary's Martha Cohen Theatre.
Explain.
You're alive. I'm not. We have the same name. What do you want me to explain?
A ghost?
This play is about being alive and coming to terms with being alive. It's about forgiveness and grace.
Angels in America Part 1 runs in Calgary until October 12th, and Edmontonians can catch Angels at the Phoenix Theatre later this month.
And here are some stories we'll have for you tonight at 11. 3 Alberta Mounties are suing the RCMP's watchdog agency in a case involving that labor dispute at the Giant Gold Mine in Yellowknife.
Also, lots of sports tonight. All the highlights from today's action in the first round of the baseball playoffs.
And the last-minute action on the eve of another NHL season. How's Doug Waite?
See you at 11.
Okay.